He asked me to raise her son as my own. But then I found out the boy isn't even hers. What would you do? I never thought my life would take such a turn. When I first met Sarah, I felt like I'd finally found the missing piece in my life. She was older than me, confident, beautiful, and had this way of making every room light up when she walked in. She also had 2 kids, both boys, and while most guys my age would have run for the hills, I saw it as a challenge worth taking. I told myself that love was about acceptance, about building something bigger than just two people. At the start, it felt perfect. Sarah was affectionate, always praising me for being mature for my age and such a good influence on her kids. I won't lie, those words made me feel proud, like I was stepping into a role that mattered. I imagined us becoming a family, the kids looking up to me as a father figure, and Sarah seeing me as her equal partner. But even from the beginning, there was a small voice in the back of my mind whispering that I was stepping into shoes far too big for me. I ignored it, because when Sarah smiled at me, none of those doubts seemed to matter. Little did I know, this relationship would unravel in ways I could never have prepared for. And the truth I eventually uncovered about those kids didn't just shake my relationship with Sarah, it shattered everything I thought I knew about trust, family, and love. The cracks began to show slowly, almost imperceptibly, like hairline fractures in glass. At first, it was little things. Sarah would casually mention how tired she was from managing the kids, then slip in a remark about how I needed to step up more. It didn't sound like criticism at the time, more like encouragement. But soon, those small nudges became heavier. I found myself picking up the boys from school when Sarah worked late, cooking dinner when she said she was too exhausted, and even paying for small things, groceries, school supplies, toys, without being asked, just to keep the peace. I kept telling myself this was what being in a committed relationship looked like. If I wanted to be with Sarah, then I had to accept her kids as part of the deal. But what unsettled me wasn't the responsibilities themselves. It was the way Sarah acted like it was expected, not appreciated. Her warm smiles and gentle praises started to vanish, replaced with sighs and complaints about how she was basically raising the kids alone, unless I pulled my weight. That stung, because I was trying harder than I'd ever tried at anything. And yet, something deeper gnawed at me, something I couldn't quite put into words. It wasn't just the weight of responsibility. It was the sense that there was a bigger truth Sarah was keeping from me, one that would explain why this all felt so off. I just didn't know yet how devastating that truth would be. It all came crashing down one ordinary evening. Though looking back, I realized the signs had been there for months. Sarah was on the phone in the kitchen, speaking in hushed tones. I was in the living room, half watching TV, half dozing, when I caught fragments of her words. It wasn't what she said, but the tone, sharp, defensive, almost pleading, that caught my attention. When she hung up, she looked startled to see me standing there. She forced a smile, too quick, too rehearsed. My gut twisted, and I asked the simplest question I could. Who was that? She brushed it off, saying it was just an old friend, and hurried upstairs to check on the boys. Something inside me cracked. I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't telling me the full story. That night, I couldn't sleep. While Sarah was out cold beside me, I stared at the ceiling, replaying every red flag I had ignored, the shifting moods, the evasive answers, the way she sometimes bristled if I asked about the boy's father. The next day, curiosity gnawed at me until I gave in. I found the boys' birth certificates tucked away in a folder in Sarah's desk. My hands shook as I skimmed through the papers. One detail hit me like a sledgehammer. One of the boys didn't even have Sarah listed as his mother. My heart thundered in my chest. Everything I thought I knew about the life we were building suddenly felt like it was built on quicksand. And I remember sitting there, staring at that paper, my pulse pounding in my ears. It felt like the room was spinning, like gravity had doubled and was pulling me down into the chair. How could it be that one of the kids I had been cooking breakfast for, driving to school, teaching how to ride a bike, wasn't even hers? I tried to rationalize. Maybe there was a clerical error. Maybe I misread something. But the more I looked, the clearer it was. The name of another woman was listed as the mother, and Sarah's name was nowhere to be found. My mind went into overdrive. I thought about all the times Sarah had been vague about the boy's biological father, all the times she'd avoided introducing me to anyone from her past. Suddenly, it wasn't just the father's absence that was suspicious. It was the whole story that I couldn't shake the image of myself pouring time, energy, and love into raising these boys, while not even knowing the truth of where they came from. It felt like betrayal, not just from Sarah, but from the entire situation she had dragged me into. That night, when Sarah was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of whiskey, staring at the folder. Every sip burned, but not as much as the thought gnawing at me. What else is she hiding? I wasn't just questioning Sarah anymore. I was questioning the very foundation of the life I thought we were building together. The next morning, everything felt different, even though on the surface nothing had changed. Sarah hummed softly while making coffee, the kids bickered about cereal, and the sun streamed through the kitchen window like it always did. But to me, it all looked staged, like a perfect scene covering up something rotten beneath. As I sat at the table, I couldn't stop scanning every detail with new eyes. When Sarah spoke about how busy her week at work was, I wondered if she was telling the truth, or if those late nights had been something else entirely. When one of the boys called her Mommy and hugged her, a thought sliced through me like a knife. Was that really his mother he was hugging? Or just the woman who'd taken on the role? I noticed how quickly Sarah brushed past questions. When I casually asked if she'd ever kept in touch with the kid's biological father, she froze for a fraction of a second before changing the subject. That tiny hesitation, something I wouldn't have thought twice about before, now screamed at me. Even the smallest things became suspicious. The boys' birth certificates weren't in the family folder with the rest of the documents. Why had she separated them? Why had she never shown me baby pictures from the hospital? Only toddler photos. Why had she flinched once when I joked about them looking more like their uncle than her? Every detail piled up, feeding the gnawing paranoia inside me. It wasn't just about that single paper anymore. It was about every unexplained gap, every moment of silence, every forced smile. And as I looked at Sarah across the kitchen table, smiling like nothing was wrong, I couldn't help but wonder if the woman I thought I knew, the woman I was ready to build a future with, was really just a stranger wearing a mask that I told myself I was being paranoid. But the seed was already planted too deep. Every time Sarah left the room, my eyes wandered, searching for answers she wouldn't give me. It wasn't that I wanted to catch her in a lie. It was that I couldn't shake the sense that the life I thought I knew was stitched together with missing pieces. One night, when Sarah went upstairs to bathe the kids, I sat alone in the living room. The house felt unnervingly quiet, except for the sound of running water and laughter from the bathroom. I should have been comforted by those sounds, but instead, I felt like an outsider looking in at someone else's family. On the shelf above the TV was an old photo album, one I had never noticed before. My heart pounded as I slid it out, dust clinging to my fingertips. The first pages were exactly what you'd expect: family gatherings, birthdays, messy cake faces. But then I realized something strange. There were almost no photos of Sarah with the kids as babies. Most pictures started when they were toddlers, as if the earliest years had been erased. Even stranger, I spotted a few photos where Sarah looked almost uncomfortable. In one, she was holding the youngest boy, but her arms were stiff, her smile tight. The kind of smile you give when you're posing for someone else's camera, not when you're naturally caught in a moment of maternal love. That I kept flipping until a folded paper slipped out from between the pages. My pulse quickened as I unfolded it. It wasn't dramatic, not a confession, not a secret letter, but it was a hospital discharge note, half crumpled and barely legible. And the name on the mother line wasn't Sarah's. I froze. My chest tightened. My first thought was that maybe I had misunderstood, maybe it was a mistake, maybe it was paperwork from someone else entirely. But deep down, my gut told me this wasn't random. This was the missing piece that confirmed the cracks I'd been sensing all along. When Sarah came back downstairs, humming softly with damp hair, I shoved the paper back into the album before she could see. She sat next to me on the couch, acting like everything was normal. But for me, the world had tilted. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just suspicious anymore. I was becoming a detective in my own home. And the woman I loved, she was starting to look more and more like a suspect. After that night, I couldn't look at Sarah the same way. She laughed, she cooked, she tucked the kids into bed. Everything looked normal on the surface. But in my head, the cracks were spreading wider with every smile she gave me. That discharge paper burned in my memory like it was seared into my brain. I knew I couldn't just ask her. If she'd hidden something this big, There was no way she'd suddenly come clean just because I pressed her. So I started paying attention in ways I never had before. Every detail felt like it might hold the truth. Point one evening, when Sarah went upstairs early, saying she was too tired, I noticed she left her laptop on the dining table. Normally, she was very protective of it, always closing it, sometimes even taking it into the bedroom with her. My hands shook as I opened it. I wasn't proud of myself, but I told myself I had no choice. The first thing I found wasn't emails or messages, it was folders. Hidden deep in a directory, one was labeled simply with the kids' initials. I clicked it, expecting cute photos or old homework scans. What I found instead were scanned documents, medical forms, school registration papers, legal notices, and there it was again. The same name I'd seen on the discharge paper. Over and over. Another woman listed as the mother. Sarah's name was nowhere to be found on the earliest records. My stomach dropped. My hands went numb as I scrolled through file after file, every one a confirmation that Sarah wasn't being honest. At best, she had taken in children who weren't hers and lied to me about it. At worst, I didn't even want to imagine. As I sat there in the dim glow of the screen, I realized this wasn't just about the kids anymore. It was about Sarah herself. Who was this woman I'd let into my life? What else had she hidden from me? I closed the laptop just before she came downstairs for a glass of water. She smiled at me, casual and warm, like nothing was wrong. But I couldn't even look her in the eye. My heart raced, my mind screaming with the weight of what I'd just uncovered. And in that moment, one terrifying question consumed me. If Sarah could lie about something as fundamental as being a mother, then what else was she capable of lying about? Sleep became impossible after that night. I would lie next to Sarah, listening to her steady breathing, while my own chest felt like it was about to explode. Every creak in the house, every shadow across the wall, made me wonder if I was living in a stranger's home instead of my own. The scariest part wasn't even the lies themselves. It was the possibility that I was the target of something bigger. If she could fabricate an entire story about motherhood, what if her relationship with me was just another calculated move? I started replaying everything in my head. The way she charmed me so quickly, how she always insisted we move in together faster than I was comfortable with, how she seemed almost too perfect at first. Back then, I thought I was lucky. Now, I wasn't so sure. Point one evening, I overheard Sarah on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice was low, urgent. I couldn't make out every word, but I caught fragments. He doesn't know. Just a little longer. Don't say anything yet. My blood ran cold. Was she talking about me? About the kids? Or both? I wanted to storm in, demand answers, but something held me back. If I confronted her too soon, I'd lose any chance to uncover the full truth. Instead, I quietly backed away, my heart pounding so hard I thought she'd hear it from across the house. The paranoia was consuming me. I started imagining that every smile she gave was a mask, every touch a performance. I looked at the kids, sweet, innocent kids who trusted me, and I wondered if they even knew the truth about who their mother really was. And that's when the darkest thought crept into my mind. What if I wasn't just a boyfriend, but a pawn? What if Sarah needed me for something? Money, stability, a cover, and once she had what she wanted, I'd be discarded like the truth she buried. That single thought lodged itself in my brain like a splinter, and no matter how I tried, I couldn't shake it. The woman I loved might not only be lying to me. She might be using me in ways I hadn't even realized. The confirmation came when I stumbled across an envelope tucked into Sarah's dresser. I hadn't been snooping, at least not intentionally. I was folding laundry, trying to convince myself that life was normal, when a stack of clothes tipped over and revealed it. A thick, manila envelope with my name scribbled on the corner. Curiosity overpowered hesitation. I pulled it out, sat on the bed, and opened it. Inside were documents, financial papers, bank statements, even copies of my pay stubs. My chest tightened as I flipped through them. Why would Sarah have these? I had never given them to her. Then, buried at the bottom, I found what broke me completely, a draft of some sort of custody arrangement. But my name was written in as if I were financially responsible for the children. My stomach dropped. Was this her plan all along? To anchor me into raising kids who might not even be hers, let alone mine, and bind me legally so I could never walk away without paying the price? It all began to make sense. The rush to move in together, The emotional pressure to step into the role of a father, the way she reacted whenever I hesitated about our future. She hadn't just wanted me as a partner. She wanted me as a safety net. I sat there, trembling, my mind racing through every moment of our relationship. The sweet smiles, the affectionate touches, the nights she whispered promises of forever, all of it now felt tainted. How much of that was genuine? How much was strategy? When Sarah walked into the room minutes later, humming softly as if nothing in the world was wrong, I shoved the envelope back into the dresser and plastered on a fake smile. Inside, though, I was burning. I couldn't confront her yet, not without a plan. But one thing was certain, I wasn't just paranoid anymore. She was using me, and now I had proof. From the moment I found the envelope, everything changed into a kind of quiet war. I stopped sleeping the way I had before. No dramatic late-night pacing, no grand confrontations, just a careful, clinical vigilance. If she wanted a chess game, I would learn to play without tipping over the board. That I began with small moves, the kind that would mean nothing to anyone watching but would build into a case if I ever needed one. I copied bank statements and printed screens from the laptop files I had seen. I made note of withdrawals and transfers and the dates that lined up suspiciously with times she said she was at work. I photographed the birth certificate with my phone when the boys were asleep and the house smelled like my regret. I started keeping a detailed diary, dates, times, the tone of her answers, when phones went missing, when a door closed a little too quickly. It felt ridiculous and necessary all at once, like wrapping fragile evidence in plain packing tape. The other part of the plan was to become invisible. I had to act like nothing had shifted, because the moment she suspected I knew, she could erase, hide, or manipulate anything she wanted. So I kept doing the ordinary things, making lunches, reminding the older boy about his science project, pretending to enjoy the chaotic noise of Saturday morning cartoons. I let myself be the man who fixed the leaky sink, who knew the list of school teachers and the exact route the kids took to the bus stop. If she needed an alibi to prove my attachment, I would be it, present, invested, predictable. It would be my camouflage to AT first. The doubled life felt absurd. I would laugh at dinner while a folder of scanned documents sat in my glove compartment, warmed by the car and waiting for a time I could use them properly. I would sign permission slips with my name in a way that felt both false and binding. Every time I tucked the boys in at night, I felt the ache of moral contradiction, tenderness for them that was unconditional, guilt for the way I'd been deceived, and a slow-burning anger I kept tamped down like coals. Collecting proof required patience and stealth. I set up a spreadsheet with dates, cross-references, and observations that only a forensic accountant or an obsessive ex would appreciate. I sent myself encrypted emails, notes with times and short descriptions, and saved backups on an external drive hidden in an unlikely place. I downloaded copies of the storage company's contract from the night I'd seen the return address. I cataloged the pictures from the photo album, noting timestamps and small anomalies in backgrounds that suggested different locations and different summers than the story Sarah told. Every scrap built a latticework I could not unsee. While I became a quiet archivist of our life, I also had to manage the human parts that couldn't be filed away. I watched the boys more closely, not like an investigator watching suspects, but like a man who loved them and feared what their childhood might one day reveal. Leo still curled up on my shoulder with the same oblivious trust. Ava still rolled her eyes at my terrible attempts at humor. But every now and then she would watch me with a look that was both calculating and sorrowful, as if she suspected some adult conversation was happening around her head that she had no voice in. That look was unbearable and reminded me why any steps I took had to protect them first. Mia's behavior adjusted too, subtly. She became extra careful in what she left open on the laptop. She whispered on the phone with a new cadence. She cleaned the kitchen the way people tidy before company arrives, frantic, erasing crumbs and fingerprints with purpose. Once, she asked if I wanted to come with her to a pediatric appointment. I said yes without hesitation and watched her face for any flinch. She obliged. The appointment was perfunctory, the staff friendly, and the kids bemused by the typical bureaucratic rituals. On the drive home, she sang along to the radio, and I nearly believed in the normalcy of that small, bright moment. But then I would remember the envelope in the dresser and the files in the hidden folder, and the incongruity would reappear like a bruise. There was a legal angle I began to explore quietly. I scheduled an initial consultation with a lawyer under the pretext of asking about domestic partnerships and common law obligations, phrasing questions in a way that wouldn't alarm Sarah if she ever glimpsed search history. The lawyer was candid. Biology alone does not determine responsibility in many systems. Intent, custody arrangements, and signatures do. He explained what I would need to establish if I wanted to ensure I wouldn't be held financially or legally responsible for children who were not mine. Documents, timestamps, proof of coercion or deception, or a signed agreement that was obtained under false pretenses. The words he used were clinical, but they mapped exactly onto the paper trail already forming in my glove compartment. Every move I made was aimed at buying time and keeping options open. I started making contingency plans, an exit strategy that would protect the boys and myself. I thought about where we could go, what documents we would need, how I would explain to the school if I had to remove the boys from that household. The paradox was that I loved them, and it was love that made me plan. My aim was not to abandon them, but to enough distance to force clarity. Either Sarah would choose to be honest and build with us, or her choices would make the family implausible. The most dangerous part of the whole endeavor was how it eroded me. I became a living ledger, subtracting trust and adding suspicion. Every kind thing I did came with a price, because it might later be used as evidence that I had been complicit or aware. The ordinary tenderness of breakfast on a Sunday felt like a performance before a jury I had yet to convene, and yet the work had purpose. It was slow, it was careful, and beneath the cold efficiency, there was an ember of something fierce. If she had been using me to anchor her story, I would not give her the satisfaction of it. If she chose to stay honest and to fight with me for the life we could truly have, I would be there. But if she rejected that path, then I would have the proof to walk away with my integrity and to protect the boys from being used as bargaining chips in an arrangement I never agreed to. I in the night. As I lay awake cataloging what I had and what I needed, a new, terrifying thought arrived. What if she found out that I knew? The idea of her face narrowing into that look of someone who had been outplayed made my chest cold. For now, the envelope remained the central pivot of everything. For now, I kept my evidence hidden and my routine normal. For now, I was patient, and patience, I told myself, could be its own kind of justice. The strange thing about living with a secret this heavy is how ordinary the days still look from the outside. No one walking past our house would have guessed that every smile, every chore, every small laugh was just the surface layer stretched over a brewing storm. That contrast alone ate away at me. Each morning, I went through the motions, making breakfast, packing the kids' lunches, reminding them to grab their homework. From the outside, I was the reliable stepdad, the steady partner, the guy who had everything under control. But inside, I was counting lies. Every time Sarah brushed my shoulder with hers, every time she kissed me goodbye, I wondered how many truths were still buried, how many versions of her life I hadn't uncovered yet. The pressure of carrying knowledge she didn't know I had made me hyper-aware of everything she did. When she left her phone on the counter for even 30 seconds, my pulse spiked. When she laughed at a message I couldn't see, I cataloged the sound of it. Forced or natural? Did it have the lightness of someone hiding something, or the genuine warmth of someone relaxed? These questions never stopped, and they turned every simple action into evidence to be weighed. And then there were the boys. They were my anchor and my torment. With them, I felt the most genuine joy and the sharpest pain. Leo's trust when he grabbed my hand in a parking lot, Ava's sudden hugs after school. It all reminded me why I couldn't just blow this up without thought. They didn't ask for any of this. They didn't choose to be pawns in their mother's choices. And yet, they were the ones who would bleed most if I handled this wrong. That I noticed subtle cracks in them too. The kids weren't oblivious. Ava was sharper than her age let on. She would watch Sarah sometimes with a look that was too knowing, too calculating, as if she sensed her mother was fighting shadows she wouldn't name. Leo started clinging to me more than usual, not just out of affection, but with a quiet, desperate attachment, as if he sensed I was the one thing that wouldn't shift beneath him. And then came the moment that nearly tore my plan apart. One night, while I was in the living room pretending to read, Sarah sat across from me, scrolling her phone. I looked up just in time to catch the expression that crossed her face. a flash of guilt, gone in a second. She quickly locked the screen and placed the phone face down on the table, smiling as though nothing had happened. That I forced myself to smile back, to play the role I'd mastered. But inside, alarm bells screamed. That wasn't nothing. That was something. And whatever it wasn't good. That night, lying awake, the question looped endlessly. How much more don't I know? What if the envelope and the files weren't the end of it, but only the beginning? I was in too deep now. This wasn't just about love or betrayal anymore. It was about survival, mine and the kids. And if Sarah thought she could keep rewriting the script, she hadn't realized that I'd already started writing my own ending. Would you like me to keep unraveling the story into the next part, where Sarah starts making slip-ups that confirm my worst suspicions and force me closer to confrontation? It started with the little things. I noticed that when Sarah thought I wasn't paying attention, she would sometimes avoid looking me in the eye. She had this habit of fidgeting with her necklace whenever I asked about her past, as if the tiny chain could shield her from the weight of my questions. One evening, as I was helping the kids with their homework, I overheard a conversation that froze me in place. The younger one, Liam, was trying to explain a family tree assignment. He casually said, "But I don't have a grandpa like my sister does. Mommy said my daddy was someone else." The words sliced through the air like a blade. I pretended to stay calm, nodding at his paper, but inside I felt my world tilt. I had suspected, of course, the timelines, the way Sarah avoided talking about Liam's early years, but hearing it slip from the child's mouth made it terrifyingly real. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Sarah scrolled through her phone beside me. I couldn't even hear the sound of her breathing without wondering what else she had hidden. Every laugh, every casual comment now felt like part of a larger lie. And then came the second slip-up. During a family dinner, Sarah's sister stopped by, and in the middle of casual conversation, she looked at Liam and said with a smile, "He really does look just like his real dad, doesn't he?" The room went dead silent. Sarah shot her sister a look that could kill, then quickly changed the subject. But my heart was pounding so loudly I thought everyone could hear it. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just paranoia anymore. There was a truth buried in our lives that Sarah was desperately trying to keep hidden. And once you notice cracks in a wall, you can't stop seeing them everywhere. I realized something else that night. I couldn't keep pretending. The pieces were starting to come together, and it was only a matter of time before the entire facade collapsed. After that dinner, I couldn't ignore the nagging voice in my head any longer. I needed clarity, something tangible to confirm what my instincts had been screaming at me for weeks. Pretending everything was fine was slowly driving me insane. So I started paying closer attention. Every time Sarah got a phone call and stepped out of the room, I noticed how her tone softened, almost like she was speaking to someone she didn't want me to hear. When I asked who it was, the answer was always vague. Work, a friend, someone from the kids' school. I nodded, but inside I was cataloging every inconsistency. At night, when Sarah was asleep, I would sit in the living room, scrolling through old family photos on her social media. Most of the early pictures of Liam were either cropped tightly around him or taken without anyone else in the frame. The few where another man appeared, his face was never tagged. But what unsettled me most was how Sarah had quietly deleted many of those older albums. Almost as if she was scrubbing away a history she didn't want me to see. I even started noticing Liam's mannerisms, the way he tilted his head when he was confused, how he drummed his fingers when he was impatient. They weren't things he picked up from me. They were traits I had never seen in Sarah either. It felt like I was raising a stranger's child under my own roof, and every time the thought crossed my mind, a fresh wave of guilt crashed over me. It wasn't Liam's fault. He was innocent in all this, but guilt didn't erase the growing anger. I couldn't stand lying in bed next to Sarah anymore, pretending to be the supportive partner while inside I was unraveling. I began quietly gathering every clue, every fragment of truth, so that when the moment came, I'd have more than suspicions. One evening, when Sarah went to shower, I carefully opened the drawer where she kept important papers. At first, I told myself it was just curiosity, but the knot in my stomach already knew I'd find something. And there it was, a folded envelope with hospital records from years ago. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. Right at the top, under Father, was a name I didn't recognize. I froze. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I had the proof. And it wasn't just about Liam anymore. It was about trust, about years of lies layered carefully beneath the surface of our relationship. And now, with the truth in my hands, the question wasn't if I would confront her. It was when, after finding those papers, I sat frozen on the couch for what felt like hours. The words on the page burned into my mind. But even more painful was the realization of how easily Sarah had hidden this from me all these years. She must have walked past me every day, kissed me, smiled at me, all while knowing I was living a lie that I didn't storm into the bathroom and confront her that night. No, I couldn't. My anger was white hot, but my instincts told me this needed to be done carefully. If I burst out now, she'd twist the story, make excuses, maybe even accuse me of invading her privacy. No, I had to be smarter. So I started acting. I smiled at dinner. I asked about her day. I even helped the kids with their homework like nothing had changed. But inside, I was analyzing every word she said, every glance, every pause in her sentences. It was like living with a stranger in my own home that in secret, I began preparing. I copied the hospital records and stored them safely. I checked bank accounts, messages, and even subtle things like when she left the house or who she spent time with. Every clue painted the same picture. Sarah had built an entire world of half-truths and omissions. And I was the fool who had accepted it. But the hardest part wasn't the anger, it was looking at Liam. He'd run to me with his drawings, or curl up against me on the couch, and my heart would ache. None of this was his fault, yet every time I saw his smile, I couldn't shake the knowledge that the blood running through his veins wasn't mine. That I started planning the confrontation. Not out of revenge, but out of necessity. I couldn't keep rotting from the inside, pretending everything was normal. The moment had to be controlled, precise, undeniable. And most importantly, it had to happen in a way that Sarah couldn't escape behind lies anymore. So I waited. I waited for the right night. When the kids were asleep, when the house was quiet, and when Sarah wouldn't have anywhere to run. And when that night finally came, I looked her straight in the eyes and asked the one question I had been dying to say for weeks. Who is Liam's real father? When the words left my mouth, the air in the room shifted. Sarah's face went pale instantly, as if all the color drained out in a single breath. Her hands trembled around the mug of tea she was holding. And for a moment, she didn't even blink, just stared at me like a deer caught in headlights. She tried to laugh at first, a hollow, nervous chuckle that didn't reach her eyes. "What kind of question is that?" she said, her voice shaky, almost too quick. But I didn't break eye contact. I didn't move. I let the silence stretch, suffocating, until her false bravado cracked. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but no words came out. She looked down at the table, fiddling with her hands, and that's when I knew. If there had been nothing to hide, she would have been furious at the accusation. Instead, she looked guilty, cornered, terrified. "I found the papers," I said, my voice low but sharp, like a blade cutting through the air. "I know Liam isn't mine. I want the truth. All of it. Now." Her body tensed as though I had slapped her. Tears welled up in her eyes. But I had seen that act before. How she could summon tears whenever she was caught in a lie. How she weaponized guilt to shift the blame onto me. But this time, I wasn't backing down. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It was a mistake. It happened so long ago. I thought it would never come out." Those words were like a dagger twisting deeper into my chest. A mistake? That's how she described the lie that defined my life for the past 7 years? The boy I had raised, the nights I stayed awake with him when he was sick, the moments of pride watching him take his first steps, reduced to a secret she thought would stay buried. That I clenched my fists under the table, my nails digging into my palms to keep myself from exploding. "Tell me everything," I demanded. My voice was calm, but beneath it was a storm that could tear the house apart. Her tears finally broke, streaming down her face as she confessed. The name of the man I had never wanted to hear entered the room like poison. An old coworker. A one-night lapse she swore meant nothing. And yet, that one night had given me a son who was never truly mine. At that moment, I didn't know if I was more heartbroken, enraged, or simply numb. But one thing was certain, there was no going back. The truth had ripped apart whatever illusion of a family we had left. Sarah's confession poured out. Every word felt like acid burning through the foundation of my life. She kept repeating, "It was a mistake. It was just one time." as if that somehow lessened the betrayal. But to me, it didn't matter if it was once or 100 times. The damage was done that I sat there, frozen, while her words replayed in my head like echoes in a dark cave. My mind raced back to every memory I had with Liam. The first time he called me Dad, the way he used to run into my arms when I came home from work, the bedtime stories, the scraped knees, the laughter. All of it suddenly felt like a cruel joke. For years, I thought I was building a family. In reality, I was unknowingly living a lie. Sarah reached across the table, her hands trembling, trying to grab mine. Please, she begged through tears, don't let this destroy us. Liam loves you. You're the only father he knows. We can work through this. But her words only made the walls around me close and tighter. She wasn't crying because of the pain she caused me. She was crying because the truth was out, because her perfect little illusion had shattered. Inside, I was being torn apart. Part of me wanted to stand up and walk away that very moment, to burn every bridge and never look back. Another part of me, the father in me, thought about Liam, the boy I had raised as my own. Was it fair to abandon him because of a choice his mother had made? Would I be punishing him for a secret he never asked to be born into? I felt like I was being ripped in two. My loyalty to the child I loved clashed with the rage I felt toward the woman who had lied to me for nearly a decade. The worst part? Deep down, I realized this wasn't just about Liam. It was about trust, about betrayal, about the way Sarah had looked me in the eyes for years and built our life on lies. How could I ever look at her again without seeing the truth behind her tears? I pushed her hands away and stood up, my chair screeching against the floor. My voice shook, not from fear but from fury barely contained. I don't even know who you are anymore, I said. And I don't know who I am in this house. But I do know one thing. Nothing will ever be the same again. Her sobs filled the silence, but I didn't comfort her this time. For once, I let the weight of her choices hang heavy in the air, because the next step I took would decide not just my future, but Liam's. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled sobs coming from Sarah's side of the bed. Normally, hearing her cry would have pulled me closer, would have made me reach out and try to comfort her. But not anymore. Now, every tear she shed sounded hollow, like an echo of all the lies she had told me. My thoughts kept circling back to Liam. His laughter, his drawings that he proudly taped to the fridge with shaky little letters spelling out Dad. His trust in me, unshaken, unconditional. He had no idea that the foundation of his world had just been blown apart. And here was my torment. I loved that boy more than my own life. But was I strong enough to stay in this house, in this relationship, knowing he wasn't biologically mine? Could I separate my role as his father from the rage I felt toward his mother? Or would every smile, every hug, remind me of the man she had slept with, the shadow hanging over everything we built? I imagined Liam growing up, one day learning the truth. Would he look at me with resentment? Would he feel betrayed, thinking I wasn't really his father? Or would he be grateful that I stayed, even when I had every reason to walk away? The questions tore me apart. And then there was Sarah. She begged for forgiveness. But how do you forgive a betrayal that lasted 9 years? Every anniversary, every family photo, every moment we shared was now tainted. She had stolen my right to choose, my right to know the truth from the beginning. By dawn, I realized I was standing at a crossroads. One path meant staying for Liam, trying to rebuild on the ruins of a lie. The other meant walking away, reclaiming my dignity, and leaving behind the child who had been my entire world. Either way, I knew the cost would be devastating. As the sun rose, I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. My mind was already spinning with what felt like the most impossible task of my life. How do I talk to Liam about this? Or worse, should I even talk to him at all? At 9 years old, his world was simple. Saturday mornings meant pancakes. Summer evenings meant chasing fireflies in the backyard. He believed in Santa Claus a little too long, and he still thought I could fix anything with a screwdriver and duct tape. To him, I was invincible. I was Dad. And yet, sitting there, I wondered if I should shatter that illusion. Should I tell him now, while he's young and pliable, before the truth hits him like a storm later in life? Or should I protect him, carry this burden alone, and let him live in blissful ignorance until he's older? I pictured his small face twisting in confusion if I told him. He'd ask questions I couldn't answer. He'd cry, maybe even blame himself. And the thought of Liam looking at me with anything but love, it gutted me. But on the other side, what if someone else told him? What if Sarah, in a moment of guilt or anger, blurted it out? Or worse, what if the man who fathered him showed up one day, claiming rights he never earned? That scenario terrified me even more. So I began to draft the conversation in my head, carefully, cautiously. I would sit him down, maybe in his room where he felt safe, and I'd explain that families aren't just about blood, that love makes a father, not DNA. But every time I rehearsed the words, my throat tightened and the sentences collapsed. The weight of deciding whether to keep the secret or reveal it was crushing me. I knew that whichever road I took would define Liam's future, and mine, that I couldn't carry the weight of the decision alone anymore. That night, after Liam had gone to bed, I called my older brother, Mark. He's the one person I've always trusted to give it to me straight. No sugarcoating. I told him everything. Sarah's confession, the years of lies, my doubts about telling Liam. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, the kind that makes your stomach twist. Then Mark finally said, "He's your son. You've been his father every day of his life. No test changes that. But he deserves to hear the truth from you, not from someone else. If you hide it, it'll come back worse later." His words settled deep inside me. He was right. I couldn't protect Liam forever, but I could control how he learned the truth, gently, honestly, with me by his side instead of blindsided by someone else. A few days later, I sat with Liam in his room. The walls were plastered with posters of superheroes, and his Lego sets were scattered across the floor. My hands trembled as I began that I didn't use complicated words. I didn't drag Sarah through the mud. I just explained, as carefully as I could, that families are built on love, not just biology. I told him that while I wasn't the one who created him, I was the one who raised him, and that would never change. He stared at me with wide eyes, silent for what felt like an eternity. My chest ached, waiting for the rejection, the questions, the heartbreak. Then he climbed into my lap, wrapped his little arms around me, and whispered, "You're still my dad. That's all I care about." In that moment, the crushing weight I'd carried for weeks finally lifted. The truth didn't destroy us. It strengthened us, Sarah and I. Well, our future is uncertain. Trust is hard to rebuild, and I don't know if we'll survive as a couple. But as a father, I know where I stand. Liam is my son, no matter what. And that's the truth I'll hold on to. Looking back now, I realize that truth is a double-edged sword. It can cut deep, but it can also carve out space for healing. For weeks, I thought telling Liam would shatter his world. Instead, it showed me just how strong he already is and how strong the bond between us has always been, Sarah and I. We're still figuring things out. Betrayal doesn't fade overnight, and trust isn't something you rebuild with apologies. Maybe time will heal us, maybe it won't. But what I know for sure is this: love isn't about DNA. It's about showing up every single day through the highs and lows, through the lies and the truths. Liam taught me that. With just a few simple words, he reminded me that I am, and always will be, his dad. And no secret, no betrayal, no past mistake can ever erase that. Sometimes, the hardest truths reveal the most unshakable bonds. And maybe, just maybe, that's what family is really all about. Thank you for watching this story on True Tales Hub. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our next story. That we post new tales twice a day, and each one comes with unexpected twists you won't see coming.